Hey guys, Rob Samples here. So, I thought for this video I would talk a little bit about the 7D Mark II, the Canon 7D Mark II. I've had this about 2 weeks now. This was quite an anticipated arrival for me. I've used a 7D. The 7D was the first serious camera I owned. I bought that probably, God dear, where are we? Nearly 3 years ago. Actually, I'm using that now to film this. So the 7D Mark II was always something that was going to be of interest to me. I wanted to see how it performed, how it compared. I didn't buy it initially when it came out. I didn't pre-order it. I wanted to wait till people actually had it in their hands and there were reviews based on real-life usage. And I wanted to see what it was like. So I did that. I saw reviews which made me convinced enough to buy it, or at least that it was going to be good enough for my needs. The biggest thing, as with everyone with this camera, was what it was going to be like at higher ISO levels. And I'm going to talk about a bit about that in my experience in a bit, but I saw feedback which suggested it was good enough. And yeah, I just thought I would do an initial video. I'm not going to go through it like point by point. I'm not going to go through menu item after menu item. I'm going to give more of an overview on my opinion, really. I've tested this now. I've used it at 2 football games, one of which was under floodlights. I've used it at 2 basketball games, both indoors, and I've tested some different aspects of it, which I'll talk about. So, initial impression, it feels and looks very similar to the original 7D. A few slight changes, a few obvious bits in terms of just kind of how it looks, I suppose. It certainly feels like it's slightly better quality. The finish is nice. A couple of little bits with button changes. There's this little toggle switch here on the back which is new. There's a button in the top of this twist dial here, so this locks, so you can't just twist this dial without pressing the button first to twist it, which is nice. Otherwise, it looks largely the same. The battery is in the same place. It's you know, most of the buttons are in the same place. It's still got the little pop-up flash, which God, hey, I'll be honest, I can't recall really a time when I've used this, but it's still got the little pop-up flash on the top here. You know what, I don't think I've ever used it. I say I can't think of a time I've used it. I don't think I've ever used it, and to be honest, I probably won't. So, the camera itself, a couple of the key points, and as I said, it's more of an overview, guys. Something which I really like about this, and one of the first things straight off the bat which I like about this, is that it has 2 memory card slots. You can use compact flash and SD cards in here, which is really good. I use both, I shoot with both, I record the same images, I always shoot everything with RAW, and I record the RAW files to both. I will use one big SD card, which I just leave in there the whole time, and then I will use lots of smaller CF cards which I'll change all the time through the course of a game or an event or whatever I'm shooting. Then if there's any problem with any of the CF cards, I've got a backup on the SD. If all's well with the SD at the end of the day, I just take the SD, I plug that in the computer, and I can just download everything in one go. If I'm sending images live, which I do sometimes from the football, then I take the CF cards out and I plug them in my laptop as I go, because then there's less images on each one and it's easier for me to ingest those into the laptop and send them, because I literally have to send those like live within a few minutes of taking the photos. Next big thing about this camera was the autofocus. People talked about the autofocus, how good it should be, and I personally, I always found the autofocus in the 7D very good. I never had any problem with it. The thing I quite like about this is and I will show you the screen for this part, is the cases on the back. This is new to me, but this will be quite familiar for anyone who's shot with a 1DX, and I think the 5D Mark III, I don't know. My friend has a 5D Mark III, I will ask him. It has these different cases, so case 1, case 2, and it's basically different sensitivity levels for the autofocus. You know, the rate at which it will kind of lock onto a different object if it enters the frame, and you can use modes which will, so let's say if you're following football and the person you're focused on passes behind someone else, it won't automatically switch to that person, it will hold it for a bit so you can keep track of the original person. And I've been playing around with those. Honestly, so far I've mostly just used case 1, which is described as the versatile multi-purpose setting, which I've had some success with, so I haven't worried too much. But that's been good. I've set up the usual things I normally would with this camera. So I've got back button focus on the AF on button here, and just use the front for the shutter button. I had that with the 7D too, which I much prefer. High ISO levels is the other big thing that everyone wants to know about. My experience is good. Now, when I say high ISO levels, this has the ability to shoot at a very high ISO levels. I think, well, you know what, I should have checked. I think up to like 16,000 ISO, something like that. Oh, maybe even more. I wouldn't use it at 16,000 ISO, realistically. I would if I had to, but I wouldn't. But to be honest, I'm fortunate enough with what I shoot, I don't have the requirement to do that. What I did find with my 7D was that I would forever be, especially when I was at the football under floodlights or almost any basketball place, I would go with the 7D to 3200 ISO level. Now, anyone who's familiar with the 7D, it struggles at that level. With some venues, I'd get away with 2500 or 2000, and then it was just about okay. In Lightroom, I could bring the image back well enough, but at 3200, I struggled. But I had no choice, because I had to have it at that level to get the shutter speed I needed for the sports, because it was more important for me to have the sharper image with the shutter speed than it was to have the low ISO level. So I just had to chew it and crack on. With this, it's really good. I've shot already at 3200, no worries at all. 6400, no worries at all. You start to see some noise, like, I mean, you know, I've seen people online comparing this to like the 1DX, or people moaning, saying like, oh, well, it's nothing like the 1DX. Like, guys, of course it's nothing like the 1DX. This is like half the price of that camera. I didn't expect it to be like the 1DX. I wanted it to be better than the 7D, and it's definitely better than the 7D. I'm going to flash up some images at the end of this video with some of the data on, so you can see. The first couple will be shot at 3200, which is normally what I would shoot with at most of my basketball venues, and they're fine. The last image I'm going to put up there is one which I shot at 10,000 ISO, just because I wanted to try and see how they came out. I've processed them, and I've put the usual noise reduction and stuff onto those images that I would have done anyway. So people who say, oh yeah, but it's been processed, it's not straight out of the camera. No, it's not, but I would never put an image straight out of the camera and submit it to like my clients for the sports. I will always process them. So for me, it's about how they look after I process them, not about how they look straight out of the camera. The good news is they look better straight out of the camera, so you've got a lot more to work with than you did with the 7D, and that's my opinion. I feel confident enough with the ISO levels that at the football, when I'm shooting under the floodlights, I will set this, so you can set this so that you set your minimum shutter speed. So I will set the shutter speed at a minimum that I want it to go to, and then I put the ISO level on auto, and with that it means that the ISO level will say, okay, fine, so you want this as your minimum shutter speed, and the camera will just go on to whichever ISO level it needs to be able to maintain that shutter speed for you. I've tried that, and I feel confident enough to do that with the football now. That will spring me up with ISO levels like 4000, 5000, 6400, maybe the odd one at 8000, but it normally doesn't need to do that unless a player like runs into shadow or something. And they come out fine, so that's really good, and that's quite useful for me. I tend to not do that. I tend to just use manual mode, especially when I'm under floodlights or indoors, because the lighting is consistent, so I don't tend to use that. But maybe on like a sunny day where the shadows and sun, then maybe I would use the auto ISO level, then that would be handy. So guys, first look, first view, yeah, it's good. Weather sealing may be something to talk about, because there's been a lot said about the weather sealing of this. Apparently it's way better than the 7D. It's, you know, supposed to be really good weather sealing. That's really great to know. But to be honest, it's not a massive thing for me, because I would never just sit out in the pouring rain with this. Unfortunately, I do have to sit in the pouring rain, but I would use a rain cover over this and over the lens altogether, just because I would prefer to. I'd rather not have this sitting in the pouring rain. It seems silly to me. It's like tempting fate when, hey, you can use the cover and then there's no risk. So yeah, I would do that. I think that's all for now, guys. I'm sure people are going to have more questions about this camera, so if there are questions or anything specific you want to know, then please ask. I can't go into every single thing on this video. It would be hour long and everyone would be bored of me, but please feel free to check it out. Alright, thanks a lot, guys. Check out my blog for my other videos, and check out my website.